ahead and get started with some housekeeping items before we get started. So let me go ahead and turn things over. So first and foremost, due to the number of participants today, you've automatically muted your phones to eliminate any interferences. Please enter any questions or comments into the chat box. If you have something to add to the conversation, please note it in the chat box and we will call on you. You may also send questions through email to professional@asce.org. Also, please turn your video off to avoid sharing your video with the group or being captured in the recording. Please close all other applications, especially email, so that your system will run smoothly. And then please keep all conversation geared towards the benefit of the community and today's topic. So with all of that out of the way, we will begin today's roundtable with introductions from our panelists. Then each panelist will share their perspectives and insights on the topic of preparing the future civil engineer. The panelists will also respond to questions from the audience. So again, we have an excellent team of panelists today. Please make sure you ask all the questions that you can possibly think of. Please go ahead and take advantage of their expertise here. So with that being said, I'll turn things over to Tor. Tor, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Teresa. My name is Tor Anderson, and I'm an aviation engineer in Palmer, Alaska. I've been doing aviation planning and design for 16 years. Before that, I had a 10-year career as a land surveyor, and I've been active in ASCE for the last 14 years, both in Montana and now the last 10 years up here in Alaska. Serve on a couple of committees, and I'm excited to talk with you guys today.
Awesome. We are excited to have you here. So thanks so much for joining us. Cleo, I'll turn to you next if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cleo Avridi. I am an assistant professor at Mercer University in Macon, Georgia. Before that, I have worked in the industry. And the past 2 years, I serve in the ACE Committee on Preparing the Future Civil Engineer. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. We're excited to hear what you have to say. So next, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Andrew. Andrew, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Tirza. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Mock. I work with HP Engineering based out of Oklahoma City. I lead our structural engineering services here. That's for building projects, including new construction, additions, renovations, and assessments. So in terms of my kind of perspective on today's topic, so my background, I have a PhD in civil engineering. I'm a licensed engineer in 21 states, and I've worked in the AEC industry doing structural design, as well as some forensic assessment for building projects across the country. I wear a number of hats in my current role, including project management, business development, quality management, people development. And so I hope that'll provide some good perspectives on this important topic today. So pleased to be here and look forward to a great discussion. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. Colby, we'll turn it over to you next. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thank you, Tirza. Hi, everyone. My name is Colby Wong, joining from California. I'm an incoming fifth-year general civil engineering student at Cal Poly Pomona. I've been heavily involved in Cal Poly Pomona's ASCE student chapter since my freshman year, and I'm serving as this year's president. And thank you for having me. I'm incredibly excited for this virtual roundtable.
And we are incredibly excited to have you. Awesome. I'll go ahead and start off with our kickoff question. What are some of the most significant technical and non-technical developments that you've witnessed over the course of your education and career that are impacting critical knowledge and skills needed for future engineers? So I'll go ahead and start with Tor. Tor, is that something that you can speak to?
Yeah. So I started my career back in the early 90s in Sweden. And I think technologically, my training was to some extent for a pre-computer world with hand calculations, doing construction stakeout with a theodolite and chain, or that's what we would use here in the US. And just the immense technological development, even just on the survey side, with use of electronic distance measuring equipment, GPSs, LiDARs, drones. Right now, it feels like the technology we have at our kind of available to us as civil engineers is changing so fast that in many ways, yesterday's knowledge is, I mean, no one uses a curve table anymore. We learned how to use curve tables for doing our stakeouts and laying out our road alignments, the railroad alignments and such. There's also been a vast development in just the regulatory and policy environment that we work in, that both has technical and non-technical aspects that are it's moving our work environment compared to where I set out in my professional career 30 years ago.
Absolutely. I mean, those are some great things that we're having to think about now that we haven't had to think about previously, right? Cleo, I'll turn it over to you next. What do you see technically and non-technically moving forward?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, technology provided us with so many tools to use, but we have also a lot of development in different sectors, new technologies like 3D printing that will come in our lives even more in the future. We have big data sets to work with that we didn't have before, all this information coming our way. We have new material that are stronger and lighter and durable, and that will allow us to do different designs that we couldn't do before. In transportation, things are so different and transformative with autonomous vehicles. So it's exciting. Too much knowledge, new knowledge, and the problems are complex, and we are all called to try and solve them in a team framework.
Absolutely. Those are all important things to think about. Andrew, I'll turn it over to you next. What are some of the things that you've seen in your past education and career?
Yeah, so I would say, I think that we're at a point where the balance between our technical skills and the professional soft skills that we need is really more important, but also kind of more challenging than ever. Kind of tied to a couple developments that I've seen in my career. One, so I work in buildings engineering, and just in my career alone, not even if you look back further over time, there's been, a big expansion in our building codes in terms of their scope and technical complexity. And this is related to, a number of things, making our projects more resilient, more redundancy, providing more flexibility in design provisions, for different materials, building configurations. There's a focus on, better performance criteria for our projects. There's been a tremendous amount of, research transfer that's been transferred to our building codes, then into adoption and practice. So these are all like really great things that have happened to advance our profession, but they do demand a lot of technical depth that we're looking for. And then on the kind of non-technical side of it, one thing that comes to mind is building information modeling. A lot of what we do now is not just putting lines on paper anymore when we deliver projects. We are having fairly complex 3D models that are used by the whole design and construction team. And so that's really changed the way that we kind of work and operate. And so we're, constantly working with different disciplines, and you really need a strong understanding, of working with, an architect, other engineering disciplines, to be able to communicate and collaborate and be successful on a project. And then one other last thing I'll mention in terms of non-technical development is, we see a lot more accelerated project schedules and other types of construction delivery methods. And so these really demand, strong relationships between the engineer and the construction manager or design build partner. So there's a lot more collaboration during design, to help us work out, cost control, means and methods, lead times for materials. So again, just this idea of, building those relationships, being able to communicate on this kind of multidisciplinary, diverse team is really key today.
Absolutely, that's a great point to think about, that teamwork and multidisciplinary. And Colby, I'll turn to you next. What have you seen throughout your education as far as what technical and non-technical skills we'll need moving forward?
Thank you, Teresa. So my response is more towards the personal skills needed for future civil engineers and not so much the technical skills used in civil engineering. I just saw our first question too, how COVID could change our work culture. So hopefully my answer kind of answers that as well, because I did want to bring in the pandemic as an example. But with the advancements we have in technology today, in addition to this long COVID-19 pandemic, many of us have been attending school and working from home and have gotten comfortable with communicating with our cameras turned off. I am guilty of this myself and can probably speak for a lot of other college students out there. When things first started opening up again, I found myself a bit anxious seeing and speaking to people. So for me to present in front of an audience like this today definitely took some getting used to again. So I wanted to bring this to what personal skills needed for future civil engineers. As civil engineers, it's essential that we develop good written and oral communication skills, as well as leadership skills. So after this long pandemic, it's important that we take some time to practice and redevelop these skills as some of us slowly return back to our schools and workplaces.
Absolutely, those are some great points. So I'll turn to the first question in the chat. How do you see COVID and DE&I changing our civil engineering work cultures in the future? Which, Colby, you touched on that briefly, but I want to see if anyone else has any thoughts. Cleo, do you have some thoughts on how that looks like in the future?
For sure, it has changed the way we work, and I think some of these things that have changed, like communicating more with Zoom, certainly will help, will continue to happen in the future. So we developed these new communication skills. We have the tools. We are familiar now with the tools. I believe that committees and other professional meetings in some part will continue to evolve through digital ways and not, in person.
Absolutely. Andrew, you almost look like you have something to add.
One thing I would add on that, I guess, is the idea of remote working. We all learned how to adapt to a remote working environment during COVID. And I think that that's something that is going to persist, in various forms as time goes on. And there's, one challenge that we're facing right now is, our industry, things are really good. Companies are very busy. And so we're seeing that being able to recruit, not just locally, but being able to have, workers in various offices, even working remotely, is a real opportunity to grow, your base of people that you can hire from. But it creates some new challenges in terms of, how we can, develop those individuals, how we can get them involved in the company. And so some of the traditional ways that we have helped, kind of mentor and train employees, whether that's through osmosis, just, sitting next to other people, those don't work and happen in the same way in a remote environment. So I think those are some challenges and opportunities for us as we move forward post-COVID.
Absolutely. It's exciting to think about what the future holds, right? As far as our teams and what it looks like working remotely. the next question I'll go to is we see many graduates come into the workforce with little BIM or structural analysis program knowledge. What can the engineering community do to ensure graduates can hit the ground running upon graduation? Cleo, is that something you want to speak to?
Yeah, sure. As educators, we try to incorporate the software in our, courses, the structural analysis. So I believe that this is something that educators need to take into notice if they are not doing that in their curriculum. They have to talk with their advisory board to get these needs of the industry and incorporate it in the curriculum. The students now, they need to see what is missing, what the employers are asking when they are taking an interview with them, and try to self-direct themselves and learn. So it's easy. There are available software that students can use with no cost, and they can learn on their own if this is something not offered by their institution. But again, this is critical knowledge that all curricula need to incorporate.
Yeah, Tor, from your perspective, is this something you can speak to as far as what students need upon graduation?
Sure. So when we talk about hit the ground running, it's kind of, should we say, almost like a pre-employer, could sound like it's a pre-employer task, but I think many students already take advantage of, summer internship programs and such to learn and to be prepared for their careers. And when they do, I think it falls on us as project managers, employers, that when we take on interns, that they're not just the cheap labor that's going to go out and count cars for, 10 weeks before they go back to college, but we actually put our effort into them and expose them to the type of work that they would do as young graduates, and give them a fairer, both use them more fairly, but also give them a better introduction into the work that's expected of them on graduation. But I think, like Cleo said, it is kind of in the hands of educators prior to graduation, and that communication between industry and educators is extremely important.
Absolutely, and I think that's part of why we're having this conversation, right? Is to try to get as many perspectives involved. And I actually would like to hear a student perspective, Colby. I know I actually see some of your fellow classmates in the attendee list, but what are you as a student and your fellow students? What are you all doing to prepare yourself for the workforce?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's really important to get that internship experience, even if you're an underclassman or a freshman or whatnot. It's never too early to try to get that internship experience. I also really think a lot of schools now, they have research projects. It's really good to get involved with that, as well as ASCE student competitions. All of those give you that hands-on experience and also the opportunity to work with industry professionals and actually get to do what real industry professionals do at work, rather than just learning the theory behind everything. So I really think, as a student, from a student perspective, it's really important to get those hands-on experience and take any opportunity you can to be a part of student competition teams, research projects, apply for internships, and even just attending conferences and being able to see what other engineers are doing and what you could possibly be doing post-graduation. All of that already can give you a head start before you do work full-time as a professional engineer.
Absolutely. And there's always so many different opportunities out there, like you said, Colby, that you can always learn from all of those. So the next question in the chat is, what mentorship have you received in your career? Andrew, I know you said you're licensed in 21 states. You must have had a lot of mentorship experience. Is that something you can speak to?
Sure. So I've, had some good mentors in my career. I've also acted as a mentor to others, and I think that none of us are ever too young to try and mentor others. I think that's a skill that we can all learn and grow from, and I think it can make the relationship with those that are our mentors even better, because what I found with my mentors is that most of the people that are the good mentors that you want to work with and learn from, they're also the people that are really busy, in some kind of leadership position, a project manager, et cetera. So they really want to help you, but they may not have the time to, really orchestrate some kind of, mentorship program for you. And so I think just being, proactive in that relationship, to ask questions, seek people outside of maybe just who's your supervisor, but, somebody else in your company, colleague in a related field. Those are all great opportunities to find mentorship and develop some skills. I know for me, one thing we don't learn a lot in school, or some of the training related to how we do the business side of things, and people side of things, marketing, client management, project management, business development. And so mentoring really helped me develop on those fronts. And those are areas that, I think when you start your career, you think those things are further away than they really are. They come quickly. And so, just trying to talk with mentors about those things initially. And I think the CEBOK, which is the Civil Engineering Body of Knowledge, is a great resource that I'm going to use in the future when I'm mentoring others, to kind of have a roadmap of some things that you can talk about in that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned roadmap. I know AC recently developed a roadmap based on students, based on the body of knowledge, like you just said. Andrew, I'll put a link to that in the chat box if anyone's interested. Tor, Cleo, did you all have want to share experiences with mentorship and how that has helped you to prepare for the future of civil engineering?
Myself, as a young engineer, I always try to get mentorship. I believe it is important to ask for it. So in the environment that you are, in the company that you are working for, say that you're trying to explore opportunities, you wish to know more about the profession, your fears about it, and then some people will get interested. Usually senior engineers wish to help the younger engineers. And this is the way it worked for me. I was asking other people for advice, and I generously received that. So don't be afraid to ask for it, to ask for a mentor, to ask questions and get the advice needed.
Tor,
Yeah, I guess I agree with both what Cleo and Andrew said. I think the thing when it comes to mentors that has really kind of defined my career is I've had many different mentors for different aspects of whether it's professional life or just life in general. And it's like Cleo said, don't be afraid to seek out people that you either admire or you see they got it handled, and ask them to mentor you. And but also, like Andrew said, be quick to take on opportunities yourself to mentor someone else. I mean, we see that even with young children looking up to older siblings and learning from them. That's how we grow as people, and it's not a linear age and experience relationship. Even the young rookie can teach the old silverback how to do some of the new technology or whatever. And I've had some of my mentors I've had for like 30 years. Others are short-term mentorship when you're taking on a new task or something. And so I just wanted to add that collect your mentors, develop good relationships with them, and when you step up and start mentoring someone else or start teaching someone else, that's where you really recognize that you need to master the concepts that you're working with. It's not just about application. To explain it to someone else, it raises your level of competency as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think explaining something really helps you understand it better. And I know somebody just put the link to ASU Mentor Match in the chat. So if you are looking for a mentor and need a mentor, if you're an ASU member, you can definitely search the directory there and look for one. One thing that we will see, like you said, Tor, to your point, is even people looking up to older siblings, is most of the time the relationships that we see within that program are people looking for a mentor that's just a few years ahead of them, right? Like a lot of our retired mentors, they're excellent, valuable resources, but they're not as sought after as some of our young professionals in the program, which is it's interesting to think about as far as what you look for in a mentor, right? And someone that's just done it is always helpful. So the next question in the chat we'll move to is: the tragic condo collapse in Surfside, Florida makes me wonder how civil engineers can prepare to meet future challenges related to climate change, and more importantly, help to prevent these types of tragedies from occurring. I guess what part does climate change play in developing future civil engineers, I think, is the question here. Cleo, do you want to?
Yeah, so this is a new challenge that we are facing, and we will face it more in the future. But ASC has already taking measures for that. There are active committees that work on how to assure resilience for existing structures, how to build the resilience for communities. And I believe that there is already a manual out there recently developed by this committee. So if you do a search, you can find all this information. It is absolutely necessary to deal with this changing climate. We see the impact stronger all the time. And so I believe that we will make sure to make the existing structures adapting to the changing climate, and the new ones for sure to be able be resilient, be redundant enough to last and sustain all these extreme events. So there is action, and the community is working on all these issues to develop rules for engineers to use in everyday practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I went ahead and put the link to the manual of practice, but I think that's the manual of practice that you're referring to in the chat box, so anyone can take a look at that. Andrew, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of, reacting to climate change, I would say that we're seeing a lot of advancement in the building codes for, the materials that we're using. So for example, Portland cement is a large producer of CO2 emissions. And so there's been a lot of work on what types of alternative cementitious materials we can use to help offset that, and make it a more sustainable material. And so we see a lot of that in other materials as well. But it does take some evolution of our building codes to react to, some of these changes in the materials. And so I think that's an important thing that's happening related to climate change. We're also seeing a lot more kind of performance-based standards for our building projects. So whether that be for high wind design in a hurricane region, adding tornado shelters to essential facilities, serviceability limit states in earthquake regions. These types of tools help ensure that when we have, there's, changing natural disasters, increasing natural disasters, that our new building projects are going to be more resilient to them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. It looks up, Colby, it looks like you froze for a minute, but now you're back. You are good to go. Do you have anything to add, Colby, on that as far as climate change and preparing for the future of civil engineering?
Yeah, is everything okay with my internet?
We can hear you, but it looks like your picture might be frozen.
Oh, okay. As long as you guys can hear me, then I'll be able to answer that. So for climate change in the future, I think that's really important, and that's something that a lot of future civil engineers, people who are graduating soon, so people my year, will be having to work with that a lot in the near future, and it's good that we are already seeing climate change being addressed now before it gets too late. Like Cleo mentioned, ASCE, what ASCE is already doing with their Future World Vision 2, and all the different cities, I feel like it's already really good that we're addressing all of this now before it gets too late. But climate change is definitely a really important topic. At my current internship right now, I actually work with climate change and provide situational awareness on that and see how different climate hazards affect our overall infrastructure. So yeah, it's definitely a huge topic that we have to address, and we are slowly working towards in the future to mitigate all of those climate hazards, but definitely it's something that we cannot not worry about.
Yeah, absolutely. It always has to be top of mind. So that kind of segues, Colby, into the next question about some of these tragedies, right? Should there be more classes than ethics that teach civil engineering history so we can kind of learn from some of these tragedies in the past? Cleo, I'll turn to you to answer this one, if you could.
It is absolutely important to have these ethics classes for our students as young prospective engineers to see how important it is to have an ethical behavior, and this is needed to keep our society safe. It is civil engineering is a profession for society. We serve people. And we are like doctors somehow, medicine doctors. So we serve them, and we have to have all these ethical responsibilities well understood, and be ready to address anything that you think might not be right. Not to be afraid to tell your opinion as young engineers. This is important. As a student, don't be afraid to say your opinion. This is extremely, extremely important for our society, to teach ethics and then to teach people how to apply them in everyday life as engineers.
Does anyone have anything else to add? Tor, it kind of looks like, were you about to come off mute?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Cleo said. I think as gray hairs, we also have to be ready and willing to listen and actually not just write off concerns raised by younger engineers. And we had a pretty good example on a project that I assisted on here just a few weeks ago, where a young engineer she came to me and is like, I'm really concerned about this aspect. No one else seemed to care. And we sat down and started talking about it. And it turned out that she had very valid concerns and that are now being addressed in the project. And whether it is, about climate change or something else, but we live in an increasingly dynamic environment, both technology-wise, but also that climate, and we have to be a lot more adept at not only responding to changes, but actually actively manage our infrastructure and be prepared for the changes instead of just repairing. But I just wanted to add that.
Absolutely, that's a great point. I'll turn to our next question, which I think, Andrew, this is kind of goes to the point that you talked about earlier as far as managing teams in different places in a bigger talent pool. This person is asking, they're from India and they're saying, what do you have to do to find work in the US or the UK, and what made difference in construction field in between different countries? So I think maybe the good question in thinking about this with the future of civil engineers is, what does that mean as far as managing, remote teams globally? Like what does that look like for the future of civil engineering? Andrew, did you have any? I know because you alluded to it earlier. That's why I'm looking at you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think, one of the good things about engineering is that, the mechanics that we're learning, at our universities in the US or in India, it's the same engineering principles. I think the difference comes into play with respect to the building codes and the licensure laws. And so I think that's, one of the things that we have to interact with when we look at working in in different countries, or if you're interested in moving from one country to another. So there's won't get into that in too much detail. Each state has their own licensure laws with what they would look for, but there are opportunities to do degree evaluations, and there may be some overlap in building codes, but it may take some effort on your part to kind of learn, do some continuing education or seek projects that you could work with someone else that has U.S. building codes or building codes in the UK. So there's opportunities there, but I guess the good thing is the core engineering is the same. The code provisions, may differ.
Did anyone else have anything to add?
The best way to move from one country to another to work for
I think we might have lost Cleo. Cleo, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, you just came back.
Okay, great. So I need the easiest way to be able to work for a US company, not with a base in India. Most of the companies are global, right? But if you wish to study here, to come to the US, then you need maybe to have a degree, studies here, and that will help you a lot. You have to see also if there are any exchange programs in your country where you can again try and work for a US company, and several of the US companies have offices all around the world again, so you can apply for those, and you can travel all around the world with these companies. They do big projects everywhere, so you can also do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a comment I would just want to point out in the chat. Each project is an opportunity for mentorship. One sign of good project management is that leaders' ability to mentor junior engineers, which I think, again, as we think about preparing the future engineers. That's really going to be so important as far as mentorship and being able to prepare others. This is a fun question for everyone. What made you choose engineering over another career? So Colby, let's ask you first and see why you're studying civil engineering.
Thank you, Teresa. So a lot of my friends actually know this story, so I'm the college report. But actually, it was my grandpa. Oh, am I?
You're
Did I?
breaking up, so can you mute and then unmute to see if that works, and then see how you're sounding.
Hello?
Yep, you sound great.
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay.
Thank you. So actually, it was my grandpa who inspired me to choose engineering over another career when I was young. Up until I was 6 years old, I stayed with my grandparents because my parents were always really busy juggling other jobs to build a better future for me and my sister. So I was always staying at my grandpa's house, and he never had internet, no cable, no Wi-Fi, no computer, none of that. But my grandpa loved finding different materials around the house and just building whatever he could think of. He would build his own arbor. And so one day I was just really bored, and I just found wood stored in his garage. And I decided to make a little chair when I was 6 years old. And because of my size, I wasn't allowed to use a hammer. So instead, I just used the heel of my aunt's shoe. And that just kind of intrigued me, just being able to see something and be like, oh, wow, what can I make from this? And being able to create that. And since then, my love for just innovation and just being able to create things grew. And from then on, I just started helping my grandpa construct things. We built a baby crib for one of my baby cousins. So yeah, that's what inspired me to be in engineering.
That's really awesome. That's a fun story. Andrew, what about you?
So my grandfather was a structural engineer. So similar to Colby, I was inspired by my grandfather. And I really never considered another career. I think it must be in the blood. So that was kind of always my plan. Probably by the time I was in high school, started thinking about, kind of where I was going to go after I graduated. It was really just felt like the natural thing to do. So for me, I really never considered another career.
That's too funny. Cleo, did your grandparents inspire you?
No, my grandma was a teacher, but it's okay. I am a teacher now. For me, it was all about the great work that civil engineers do, the high-rise buildings, the roads, the ports, all these made me really, really excited, and I wished to be part of it. And that's what I did. I'm now part of it, of this creation.
Awesome. Tor, what about you?
I think it was a work in progress. I'm still trying to figure out what I really want to do when I grow up. But actually, I think I mentioned in my introduction, I started my professional career as a land surveyor, and my interest in land surveying was born out of a kind of work study program that we went out and just did job shadowing in junior high, and went out with the prospecting crew for the mine, and we were doing a lot of field surveying out in the kind of in the remote areas where I grew up, and that kind of planted the seed that surveying seemed to be cool. You get to work outside and you get to use your head and kind of figure stuff out. And as I started working as a land surveyor, I worked mainly with civil engineers, and always kind of looked at the challenges and being part of building something as something I wanted to do. And after moving to the US, I had to go back to college to take a couple of classes to become licensed. And so we're looking at, okay, I have to take about 30 credits. Well, we have to move somewhere because in Missoula, Montana, they're only teaching liberal arts and there's no engineering program. And the more we talked about it, the more kind of the thoughts came that, well, if I'm going to go back to school, maybe I should think about something else. And I'd always been curious about or wanting to be more involved in the whole life of a project rather than just go and do a site survey and then go and do a stakeout and be done. And so instead of taking 30 credits, I went back for 3 years and got my civil engineering degree.
Well, so it's great to hear all of your different stories and perspectives. So I'll go ahead and turn to a more practical question, if you will. What activities should prospective civil engineers or civil engineering students engage in outside of the classroom to prepare for their careers and the skills that they need to build for the future? Colby, can I turn to you first?
Yeah, thank you, Terza. Hopefully my audio's okay still.
You're good to go.
But thank you. For my fellow students out there, I kind of mentioned this earlier when we talked about how to be prepared for working in the industry as well. But get involved in on-campus organizations. So if you're already at this meeting, then that's already one step ahead of a lot of people. In addition to creating these lifelong relationships in these organizations, there are many opportunities for networking, professional development, scholarships, and more. And also, as I mentioned earlier, for some industry exposure, I highly recommend students to join research projects and competition teams. Not only will you get that hands-on experience, but you'll also be able to connect with and learn from industry professionals when executing the project. And finally, the last thing I wanted to touch base on is to attend career fairs, try to get some interviews, and apply for internships no matter what year you are in school. Even if you get an interview for a company you may not be as interested in, still take the opportunity to practice and improve your interviewing skills. When I was a freshman in college, I didn't apply for any internships because I had the mentality that companies would only hire juniors and seniors because they have more experience. But this is not the case anymore. Lots of engineering companies now want to hire freshmen and sophomores in hopes that they will want to return the following years and slowly gain different types of experiences. And these companies hope that students will become more committed to them over time and accept full-time positions after graduation. So I know many underclassmen now who were able to obtain an engineering internship in their first and second years, and I'm amazed at the work that they do.
That's awesome. That's really encouraging to hear. Andrew, did you also have some ideas?
I do, and I guess first I want to just add on to what Colby said. I think don't be afraid to apply for internships. Before you're a senior. When I was a sophomore, I applied for a number of internships, not really expecting to get one, and somebody dropped out of a program kind of at the last minute, and so I got called, and I had the opportunity to get an internship as a sophomore. And I wouldn't have that opportunity if I hadn't have, gone through the process of applying. And even if you don't get a position, it's still just good practice to, get those materials ready, maybe get to do some interviews in the process. So definitely encourage that. I guess I would say, outside of the classroom, kind of like we talked about, just focusing on, balancing your technical development that you're doing in school with some non-technical skills. So, public speaking and presenting, this is a really crucial skill that we might get some practice with in school, maybe do some presentations, but I would just encourage, to take those opportunities. It takes practice, takes getting feedback from others for us to get comfortable, speaking and presenting in front of others. Also definitely encourage, taking a leadership role, whether that be like in a younger member group ASCE has a lot of, student groups and younger member groups that can be opportunities to get involved and volunteer and take some leadership. And those are great ways to start to develop and practice some of those professional skills. And then I guess lastly, a big part of, our careers is just our relationships and professional network. And you can't start developing that too early. A lot of the people that you go to school with, those may be contacts that you have, in your network for many years or decades down the road. And so just starting to kind of practice of, keeping that network in place, using, things like LinkedIn to keep in contact with those people. It's a great opportunity, and you can't start that too early. So those would all be good things I'd suggest.
Those are all great. Cleo, did you have anything? Tori, did you have something to add?
Sorry, yeah, both or good comments from both Colby and Andrew. What I wanted to add to that is get involved in your community, even if it's not engineering related. Actually go and listen to city council, listen to the planning commission, get to know the movers and players in the community, take volunteer opportunities, even if you can serve on a committee in your local city or something. You often don't have to be more than 18 and interested, and it gives you a good opportunity to build that network also outside of your professional peers, and it gives you an opportunity to interact with others in the community at a level that we normally don't do within our professional networks. And often at the end of the day, our project delivery is going to be to the public at some point or another. And gaining that confidence to speak and to interact with public and with decision makers is very important, I think.
I'm on mute. Those are some great points and interesting elements to really think through, and I think that is kind of the focus. I think we probably have time for one more question, so I'll kind of segue that tour into, I'll piggyback that on that a little bit by asking, how can practicing civil engineers continue to grow their knowledge and skills to be prepared to design tomorrow's infrastructure? So again, like getting in there with those projects and actually delivering them. What are some of the skills that practicing engineers can do? Cleo, is that something that you want to speak to, or?
Yes, so there are many ways to enhance your education after graduation. There are certificates that you can pursue. There are based on what is the need that you have, that you see that you need. ASE, for example, has some certificates. The institutions, the higher education institutions have certificates. You can, if you don't have a master's, you may think to pursue a master's degree. It's very useful. It will enhance your knowledge and ability to find more positions that you are interested in. If you there are so many webinars available from societies that you can hear all the time. You can pursue a license if you are not licensed. This is something that everyone should be thinking about. All engineers need to be licensed. This starts as students. You need to complete your fundamentals of engineering exam and then get your PE license, the professional engineering license. So by doing that, you have the opportunity to learn more. Attending the meetings of the societies again, the branch meetings of ASE, You will get to learn a lot of what's happening and what are the needs of the industry and all the new information in your area. So there are great ways. Today's environment, digital environment allows for to easily get knowledge and learn what you need. You have to have this ability of the self-directed learning. You need to direct your learning yourselves, what I need, and you can find the ways to achieve that.
Tor, did you have anything to add?
Yeah. So actually, I have a quick story about one of the young engineers that I work with. Once he passed his PE, a couple of weeks later, once the excitement kind of had settled, he came and asked me, "So, okay, I got my PE. What's next?" And I handed him the civil engineering body of knowledge and said, "I know this is a little bit of a dry tome, and but use the civil engineering body of knowledge as a guide. Develop a personal development plan. Talk with your mentors, with your supervisor. This is kind of how I want to grow as a civil engineer, and to ask them for their help in finding those opportunities for you to grow, but also seek them out inside your professional network, inside ASCE. Join an ASCE institute. Get to know the really technical depth side that we have within our organization. We often forget about that in our more general service part of it in our ASCE roles. I've learned so much in-depth information through my institutes, and it's really focused a lot more on the technical parts. We talked about it a little bit before, but don't be afraid to teach and to mentor your peers. Seek out mentors as well. But
No, that's some great advice. So we've only got about 3 minutes left, so I'll ask you all to share maybe a 30-second recap of, today's conversation and what you think preparing the future of civil engineers means, moving forward. So, Andrew, do you want to go ahead and start off?
Sure. So I guess I would say in summary, we've talked a lot about being, well-rounded, with technical depth, breadth, and also these, professional soft skills. And, I think that's really the future of our profession, whether you're, in a technical role, project manager, engineering responsible charge, or maybe in a leadership position in your company. And I think I said earlier that, we can underestimate the progression of how fast some of those things might happen and when we might need some of those skills. So we can never start too early. And as Tor said, the civil engineering body of knowledge is a great roadmap. And if you're not familiar with it, I would definitely encourage each of you to take a look at that on our website.
Absolutely. Colby, I'll turn to you next. Do you want to give us a quick 30-second recap?
Yeah, I agree with everything Andrew had to say. I thought that this was a really great session and a very important topic, especially for future engineers like myself. And I hope that I was able to provide some college students out there with helpful advice from a fellow student like myself from a student perspective.
Absolutely, and we appreciate you joining us to provide that student perspective, because that's what it's all about, right? Is the future, and you are the future. So, Cleo, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Civil engineering is really a very exciting profession. The problems that we have to solve are complex. They need all these special skills, the right attitude in the work environment. we all can do our part, and we have to do our best to become life learners. So continue to learn and never stop to learn. Use all the tools that you have to do that. Just always learn new things.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about, right? Lifelong learning. Tora, I'll let you go ahead and close us out.
Okay. Thank you. No, I want to thank everyone for all the questions and great conversation today. And I want to echo everything that Andrew and Colby and Cleo said in their closing comments. I think the key is really that we need to be lifelong learners. We're working and practicing in a constantly changing environment. And if we stop learning and preparing for that changing environment, we will become obsolete. And through ASCE and through other organizations, we have many tools and opportunities to continue developing our skill set and to continue growing and seek out those opportunities. The Civil Engineering Body of Knowledge is a great resource to structure your continued learning. But rely on all the resources you have around you. Many of us engineers are engineers because we're introverts. We have to practice that skill of communicating early, often. And communication is not just about being able to deliver a message. It's about being able to listen and to be good listeners. And my dad always reminded us growing up that we're given 2 ears and only 1 mouth, and that should be the balance of your communication. Listening is more important than speaking. So with that, thank you, everyone.
No, absolutely. And of course, I started speaking instead of listening to you, Tors. I thought you were done. Anything else to add?
No, I'm good.
No, awesome. Well, thank you so much. That's a great point. I know we are a little bit over, but thank you again to all of our panelists. We really appreciate you joining us today and talking about this super important topic. I do want to remind everyone for ASC members that you can carry on this conversation at collaborate.asc.org. For those of you who are not yet members, I'd be happy to talk with you about the benefits and resources that ASCE does provide. So you're more than welcome to contact me. My email address is taustin@asce.org. Again, thanks so much for joining us today. And thanks to all of our panelists. I really appreciate your time.